If I'm pausing at the bottom of a squat, if I pause, am I not maximizing how much time under tension I develop?
I'm not a big fan of pausing. This comes at the expense of performance, right? You can do fewer repetitions.
Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization. My good friend Menno Henselmans is with me. He is an Instagrammer, a YouTuber, a creator, an entrepreneur, an influencer, and actually a legit person with a legit career with legit things to offer, because all of those descriptions were totally stupid. Menno.
I do prefer scientist.
Scientist.
I do prefer scientist.
Oh, you actually literally do research and
I do.
fund still further research and analyze still further research.
But you didn't call me an influencer. I like that.
I think I actually did call you an influencer.
Ooh.
I think you called it an influencer twice, actually.
Damn.
Damn. All right. So influence me on this.
Mm-hmm.
Training tempo, composed of at least 4 components. The speed of the eccentric,
Mm-hmm.
the length or degree of the pause at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
the speed of the concentric, and the degree of squeeze/stability at the top.
Mm-hmm.
That has to matter a ton for muscle growth, right?
You would think so. In research, it doesn't. There have been numerous reviews now and a lot of studies on this. Although, yeah, I would say over the last few years, the research is also quite high quality. Before, not so much. And it quite conclusively shows that as long as you're reaching the same fatigue endpoint and you are controlling the movement, you get very similar adaptations, regardless of tempo. Now, there's not as much research on pauses, so let's skip that for now. But between the concentric and the eccentric phase of movement, so when the muscle is lengthening, typically when you're lowering the weight, the eccentric phase, you need some degree of control, most likely based on the research, but even that's not completely clear, because you need a good level of muscle activation. And normally, your muscles are essentially underworking during that phase because you are much stronger eccentrically than you are concentrically. Because the actin myosin cross bridges that basically make your muscles contract, they are cleaved mechanically. Like when a muscle is lengthening, it kind of happens in part automatically. That's part of the reason that you can literally generate more force. Like it's not just easier to lower the weight, but you can actually generate more force. Now you need to load that. So you would think, I slow down the descent. That doesn't seem to work as well because it reduces how many reps you can do. And in the end, the kind of the time under tension multiplied by tension seems to add up to about the same amount. So research finds that especially when you go beyond just some eccentric control, it doesn't actually matter anymore. And then for the concentric, research finds that there is a substantial improvement in most studies. A little bit contentious if it matters if you go to failure, but substantial improvement in both performance and in strength gains when you do an explosive concentric. Like you really explosive, you push the weight up. For muscle hypertrophy, this doesn't seem to matter. I think over the long run, potentially, the higher performance, which should generate more tension, plus the potentially higher strength gains via neural adaptations, one of which is increased muscle activation, that might potentially augment long-term muscle growth. Very speculative at this point, but I think it makes sense to do your concentric with at least a decent degree amount of explosiveness. For bodybuilding purposes, I would say, do it with the intent to maximize how many reps, how many quality reps you can do. And if you're training for strength, I would say really hammer on that explosiveness, maximum explosiveness every repetition for the movements that you really want to build strength in. And then you're probably good. In terms of pauses, we have not so much research. The pause at the top probably doesn't matter because for a bench press or a squat, what happens if you pause at the top, where you don't have that much muscle tension, is you effectively turn it into a cluster set. Now, we do have a lot of research on cluster sets. Cluster sets, meaning you take a pause in between your reps, or clusters of reps, result in the same adaptations as long as you go to the same fatigue endpoint, so similar proximity to failure. For both strength development and muscle growth, if anything, there might be a benefit for strength development and in particular power development, because if you take a bit of a rest in between reps, you reduce the amount of metabolic stress and you let the muscles, you basically keep them capable of being very explosive for longer. So that might be beneficial for strength development, for muscle hypertrophy, not so much. And it also requires you to lift more weight. So the stimulus to fatigue ratio in that sense might be a bit worse for bodybuilding purposes. Like the amount of tension and weight that you have to lift, which is also the stress on your connective tissue, your joints, might be a bit higher. In the bottom, I'm not a big fan of pausing unless you need to learn the technique, which is very important at first. But when you have that down, if you don't pause in the bottom position after the eccentric phase, you get a stretch reflex. And we know in research that that augments muscle activity. and performance. And that should result in higher tension on the muscle. Probably a super marginal effect, and it does come with greater tension also on your connective tissues. But purely for maximum hypertrophy, I would just generally recommend a type of controlled eccentric, no pause in the bottom, explosive concentric or explosive enough to maximize repetition performance, and then no pause in the top unless you want to. If another problem with pausing is that, especially at the top when there's no tension, it becomes a bit of a slippery slope, with squatting, for example, where, you do 5 repetitions, you pause at the top and it's like, and then you do one more rep, and then you need, when the next rep, you have 3 breaths, etc. And at some point, you're just doing myo reps or cluster sets.
How do you track that?
Exactly. How do you track that? That's a big practical limitation of that. So I would say that generally summarizes the ideal tempo, at least based on the
use good
theory.
technique,
Mm-hmm.
control every phase of the movement,
Mm-hmm.
and you're probably good to go
Yeah. For most intents and purposes, that is the important
for
thing.
muscle growth.
Yeah.
If I intentionally slow down the eccentric, can I expect worse gains?
No, you would have to go really slow.
Slow enough to make the weight so light that it's no longer in that 5 to 30 rep range that optimizes
Yeah,
growth.
and it also becomes very impractical to just time it and manage it. When you go up to like 10 seconds, there is a trend in research for actually worse gains. I think that's mostly a practical thing when it comes to the eccentric. For the concentric, you're just so non-explosive that would be harmful, especially for strength development and potentially even for muscle growth, and just wildly impractical.
Riddle me this. If I'm pausing at the bottom of a squat and I don't give up tension, I don't fold
Mm-hmm.
over, if I pause, am I not maximizing how much time under tension I develop in a lengthened position and thus theoretically potentially boosting my gains? What do you think about that?
That makes sense. And it's also, if you slow down the eccentric, you would think that you're putting more time under tension or total tension emphasis essentially on the eccentric phase. And we know that eccentric overloading in some studies augments gains. But this comes at the expense of performance, right? You can do fewer repetitions.
But who cares how many reps I can do if I get to the same failure endpoint?
Yeah,
and
so
I
it
have
seems
high
to even
quality
out.
reps. So
It seems to even out.
Okay, cool. So at least slower eccentrics are a totally viable option if it fits other criteria that you're using, such as injury prevention or just variation or something like that.
Absolutely.
What do you think about this? And you and I have talked about this before. If you're using slower eccentrics as a coaching tool for yourself and others, because getting into the right position and actually doing the right technique is nice to say in practice, but if you're doing really quick reps, you might be doing such not good technique anymore. If you slow down at least your eccentric phase, if it's a tool by which to improve your technique, do you think it pays marginal utility then to try it?
Sure. I think it's a great tool actually to instruct proper technique. I often tell my clients, control first, explosiveness second. You cannot build on a shaky foundation. That's very literally true when it comes to exercises like the squat. Don't try to be explosive and bounce out of the hole if in the hole you cannot control your spinal position and you're flapping all over the place.
It makes a lot of sense. One of the things that, I think was sort of this channel and our views on here, my views on here, are known for slow eccentrics. And the reason is that a lot of the times we coach folks on YouTube, we use slow eccentrics. But that's because that's mostly the first time they've ever trained in our technique. And thus we use slow eccentrics in order to get them to focus on targeting the correct muscle, generating tension from the right place, and hitting the right literal position. So I think that's how kind of that misinterpretation things. It's interesting. I get shit on my own Instagram where I post all of my training for my eccentric control. They're like, shouldn't your eccentric be slower? And I'm like, should it? And they're like, well, yeah, you say that all the time. I'm like, what? I don't say that all the time. You've just seen it on our channel. I say that to other people who don't know how to execute the movement correctly if the eccentric is quick. So if the eccentric is quick but still applied, I think there is totally fine to use a relatively rapid eccentric if you're comfortable with the injury trade-off. Another thing, on the channel, we train a lot of juice monkeys, and they get little bitty tendons. Trend makes them even smaller, and the muscles are really big, so a slow controlled and deep pauses help to limit the super high forces in a stretch position, which reduce injury. So that explains another little bit of thing. One last thing.
Plus the pure emphasis on hypertrophy.
Totally.
Because most of my clients, especially if they don't really specify, I only care about muscle growth, I will typically assume that they care at least a little bit about strength. Most people that go to the gym, it's nice if you're stronger. Like, all else equal, wouldn't you like to be stronger as well? Most people would say yes. So in that sense, I optimize for hypertrophy, but if I can get some strength there as well, I will do it in most programs. Like if a client doesn't specifically tell me one way or the other, typically I will try to power build at least a little bit, but emphasizing body recomp because that's what most people care about the most.
Sure. Menno, I've heard that the eccentric phase in realistic lifting conditions per unit of mechanical work completed requires less neural input, less nervous system activation. Does that not lead us to at least tentatively hypothesize that more of a focus on the eccentric, and I don't mean just by slowing it down, but by making sure you're really milking the eccentric in some way or another, could improve our stimulus to fatigue ratio? Because fatigue is at least in some part derived by how hard you're trying psychologically to activate your nervous system. What do you think about that idea?
If we're defining stimulus purely in terms of hypertrophy.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, because you might lose some strength development if you start going really slow, your performance goes down, you don't have the stretch reflex. So if we're defining stimulus purely as muscle growth, and we're defining fatigue, we encompass connective tissue stress, like injury risk.
Definitely.
I would say yes, absolutely. In fact, even beyond that theoretical argument, I would say that slow eccentric and eccentric emphasized training in general, even pure eccentrics, have a very good track record in physiotherapy research.
Yes.
For rehab.
They are rehabilitative and potentially protective, such that if you do slow control eccentrics, not only can you rehab injured muscles and tendons and ligaments, but you can also potentially make yourself a little bit more bulletproof. Super instructive, Menno. Thank you so much. Can I ask you a couple of oddball questions? Hey, Scott.
Go for it.
Scott, the video guy. Why don't we ever do a rapid fire segment on this channel?
You can do the first one right now.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for your approval, you fucking asshole. You know what? I need more creativity out of you, Scott. Ever since we passed 1 million, we're in
really
the.
phoning it in.
It's from the fucking frying pan into the fire, man. Really? Like, yeah, you can do whatever.
Yeah.
Favorite ice cream flavor? What are you going to say, Menno? You help me out.
Ice cream. I mean, I would love if we lived in a society where people realize that ice cream can be made low fat, low sugar, well, zero sugar, in fact, and still be sweet and great. And the technology has existed for over 10 years, but there's just not enough market demand for enough of high protein, low fat, low carb ice cream to be available. That's the flavor I want, regardless of what actual flavor it is.
So you're a macros obsessed, orthorexic, insane person.
You got it.
Muscle dysmorphia. Prevalent in fitness, not bodybuilding. You go to the gym, a regular gym, LA Fitness and San Francisco metropolitan area. How many motherfuckers got body dysmorphia? Diagnosable, psychiatrically valid body dysmorphia. Are we talking about rare? Are we talking about surprisingly common? What is your intuition on this?
There is literature on this. It depends a lot on how you define it. If we're literally talking clinical, I would say not many.
Very few.
Because if you're really talking the original definition of body dysmorphia to the clinical sense, like anorexics, if you have anorexics, look at pictures of girls, other girls, it's usually women, that are extremely lean. They will accurately identify them as being starved.
Yep.
So in general, they are quite accurate at identifying it in other people, but then if you show them a picture of themselves or you ask them about themselves.
And they're skinnier than those women.
Exactly. And they will be completely, horribly wrong. And not to the extent of, being polite or humble or any of that, just like they really, really don't see it. That is true body dysmorphia. Most bodybuilders don't have that. They just have that everyone on YouTube is bigger than them and everyone on Instagram looks better than them.
And they're not wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So we just have a frame of reference issue. And a lot of people also actually have body dysmorphia in the opposite direction. People in general think that they are better at everything than they are. People think in general then they are leaner than they are. Most people are disappointed with their DEXA scan results. So yes, there is certainly a lot of insecurity. Men think they're not big enough. Women think they're too fat. But on the other hand, there's also a whole lot of people that actually kind of over-evaluate themselves in a lot of senses.
All right. The Steven Crowder meme, the change my mind table, Menno Henselman sits at it. You're in worse shape than you think. Change my mind. One last question. Total oddball question.
If Mike says it's an oddball question, something fucked up is coming.
Or it's totally normal and you're like, you're insane and have no idea what oddball means. You did a real bad thing, Menno.
Which one?
Remember when you took a school bus full of a genetically engineered chimera combination of children and puppies and just sent it into the bottom of the ocean, drowning and crushing these poor puppy children under massive pressures. And the government of the Netherlands decided that there was such a terrible crime that they're going to reinstitute, back from 1826, the death penalty only for you. But since it's the Netherlands and the jails there look like the luxury hotels in the United States, you get one last meal of your choice. I mean, they have private jets. They have freezers bringing you fucking shit from Japan. They have a team of Michelin star chefs, no expenses spared. You get whatever last meal that you want. Menno, what's your last meal?
So this is your way of asking what my favorite food is after you didn't get a satisfactory question.
Well, that was
or
ice
response to
cream,
the ice cream.
and your answer was quite literally psychopathic. So I'm trying another approach.
Okay.
Tailored to the psychopath that no doubt loves to kill disgusting chimera, godless hybrid puppy children that honestly deserved it. I'm with you. They should have died, but the Netherlands government, not so much. The Kingdom of the Netherlands, you upset them for the last time.
Okay, so my thoughts on favorite food are that people should adopt more of an economical perspective of revealed preference.
Jesus Christ. Scott caught the...
This is what you get. You wanted rapid fire questions.
This is neither rapid nor fire.
People say, oh, I love zucchini. When do you eat zucchini?
Shut up.
Never. Then you don't love zucchini. I love Greek yogurt with raspberries and sucralose. Why do I love that? Because I eat it every day. It's my breakfast. It's my breakfast when I'm cutting. It's my breakfast when I'm baking.
I thought you were going to say, it's my breakfast, it's my lunch, and shit, it's even my dinner. Like, okay, cut the cord.
I used to do it that way, but that ended up not working so well with mineral deficiencies and stuff.
I haven't tried it though.
College. Of course, college.
That was called college.
100%. So your last meal in a filthy, roach-infested, the roaches are bigger than the rats. Both are present. Kingdom of the Netherlands prison cell is raspberries, Greek yogurt, and sucralose.
Might as well.
One last time for old time's sake.
Yeah, just stick with the familiar.
My man, stick with the familiar is good advice for you incels. And gee, Menno, god damn, that was a good answer. Try any recommendations on yogurt? Are we talking about, is it fat-free Greek yogurt or is it some fat? Fat-free yogurt.
Yeah, I go fat-free.
But the fat stuff tastes better, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you have the calories and you have the saturated
Menno,
fat.
you're going to die in an hour. Who gives a shit about calories?
You never know. You always optimize for the long run.
Can you imagine? They're like, hey, we got this whole mixed up, you're free to go. And you're like, I ate all this fucking shit food. Now I'm fat. Let me kill myself. Fuck
exactly.
it.
Imagine if that happens.
That would be awful.
Yeah, if you're going to get hanged, at least have a six-pack.
The people like admiring you and shit when you're getting hanged. I guess the best food if you're getting hanged and people are admiring you for a six-pack is like a couple of Lasix pills so that you get a little drier before you go on there. And like you get hanged, but like that one bitch in the front row is like, ooh, at least you got that hoe. And maybe as you're dying, you're like, yeah, exactly. I was going to do the same thing. You're like, ah, bitch. And you flicker off to show your dick. Anyway, guys, don't ever let me speak on public television ever again. That's been my lesson. Menno Helmsmans is the man. He's on YouTube. He's on Instagram. Good luck spelling his name. It's about as weird as mine. See you next time. Pleasure as always. Peace, homies.
Yeah.